Welcome to the next episode of Take a Break.
Take a break. Keep the whole world guessing. Take a break from the human race. Take a break when it gets depressing. Take a break.
Pat Armistead is a voice for all that is joyful. In this series, she brings a fresh approach to emerging consciousness. Through conversational, social, and emotional intelligence, she and her guests explore new models of leadership that embrace humour, empathy, and compassion.
Welcome back to Take a Break. My guest today is Alan Riva, and Alan has committed his life really to the notion of presence and purpose and how that might support people thriving in business. One of the number one things he talks about is, he says that the source of growth for smart business is purpose, and we're going to have a very expansive conversation about that. Alan, thank you so much for meeting with me again today. A couple of months ago, we had an amazing conversation, and I'm delighted to be back now and able to record some of the things we talked about back then. There are two words that are key influences in your life and your business, and they're presence and purpose. Thriving fits in alongside that. And one of the things I noted on your website is you have a little quote saying the number one source of growth for smart business is purpose. So I wonder, as we open, can you expand on that for us, please?
Yeah, so from the perspective of purpose, from a business perspective, historically we've been in this context of profit first and profit kind of dominant model, especially when it's a public business as well, short-term shareholder value. And one of the things that has been so encouraging that we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years, and even faster growth in the last 5 or so years, has been this growth of a more conscious, rounded business model, which is where an organization looks at the impact that it has, and it's inclusive. Quite often what happens is that people think it's an either or. So either you're a purpose-orientated business, which is sort of, again, every definition should be done within the context of the organization itself and the communities it works within, its environmental impact, its staff, everything, its own environment. But the purpose-led organizations traditionally, or environmental organizations, were seen to detract from profitability, and they don't need to. We're seeing that you can be both positive in impact, so purpose-orientated, and profitable at the same time. And we've seen businesses do this with huge longevity, such as Patagonia, for example, the clothing company that's been going since the late 70s, early 80s, and is a global business with one of the most loyal tribe of customers that exist on the planet. And on a social perspective and on an environmental perspective, they've done huge things. I think they were the first organization business in the US to bring in a creche and maternity leave and then paternity leave. And obviously it's very well documented, their passion and their purpose for protecting the planet, even though they are an organization that creates and draws from the planet by creating clothing. But they've been one that, so what is that? That's my math isn't great. We're talking 40 years they've been going, and they've been making money. So, there's these great kind of examples, and obviously much more modern examples as well. When you start to look into, for example, B Corp and all of those certified businesses, there's several thousand of those now that you can see are both profitable, but also, really importantly, they care about the people who work for them and their lifestyles, their health, both mental and physical and emotional. And they care for the external environment, which includes their suppliers, it includes the communities that they operate within. and it includes the impact that they have on the planet for the present and also for future generations. So the context of kind of purpose within business that I work within is that it's then about helping organizations in different phases, no matter where they are on the journey. If it's very early on, it's about them understanding and kind of getting clarity on what their purpose is, and then how that becomes a center of gravity for them, both in how their culture grows, but also how they can then grow from a corporate perspective. I mean, from a commercial perspective as well. And sometimes I'll be working with companies who are much clearer on their purpose, and it might be more about impact. And it's not necessarily companies; it's also, you know, NGOs and social enterprises and all sorts of things. I feel really blessed that you know, so many people are looking in this area and are passionate about bringing it into their business. That I get to meet some amazing people who are doing incredible work.
Yeah. Another word that you use quite a bit is the term potency, and it's not a phrase that I hear a lot. So I'd love you to expand on that too. What are you expressing there when you talk about that?
Well, I think so that comes from a core part of my life, and which is also then a core part of my work, which sort of sits hand in hand with the purpose-based work. But it's born of being present and the state of presence. And just to kind of give some context around that, you know, we have a state of being totally present in life, or we can be distracted, you know, and we live in a world that draws us more into distraction than lulls us into presence. So it's a hard thing to do. But so when we're in a state of distraction, either through technology, you know, constantly checking our mobile phones, social media, always on for work, or even just this, it's in the Western world especially, it's like we have this addiction to busyness. You hear it in the language when you ask someone how they are. Certainly in a workplace, quite often the response will be, oh, I'm so busy, or you know, they'll have their own language for it. Under the pump, and stacked, and whatever it might be, all these sorts of things. So we have we have a world, and we have systems that draw us into distraction. And then we have a state of presence. And presence is our natural state. It's how we're born. You know, it's like, you know, when you first look at a newborn child, and I've got two beautiful children, and I remember the moment when you first look at them and they're just completely present with you, with the world, and they draw you back into that. And so it's something that we are born with, and it's something that we often pass as. I've been really blessed and lucky to spend time with a number of people very close to me as they passed, and had experiences of that and how they drop further and further into presence and peace as they're passing. And so, so presence is this state that also helps fill us up. So when we're distracted, we're constantly emptying our cup because we're giving to a task, or we're giving to what we feel is a demand from our business, or from trying to make the house look perfect, or whatever it might be for people individually. But distraction drains us, it empties our cup. And when we're present, what we're doing is we're able to give our mind, you know, it's that thoughtless space where it enables our mind to just stop for a moment and to just allow itself, just in that pause, to fill itself back up again. Our whole body fills back up. And so when we're present, and this is getting to the word potency, when we're present, it gets us into what I feel, and from my own experience and from working with others, is our optimum state in broadly the three flows of life. One is with work, one is in relationship, and one is with ourselves and creating the life that we truly want to live, not one that others we expect of us, or that is born of an identity. And so the potency word really came up for me because language is a bridge, as we all know. And when I was doing some work, for example, in Combank, around working with a great friend who's a First Nations elder, and they'd asked us to come in around Are You OK Day, but to do a week's worth of programs, which were effectively sessions and workshops, which were mindfulness sessions. But we were very conscious about our language, and that using words like meditation or certain mindfulness phrases you create a barrier for people, because a lot of the people in that environment will be like, that's not for me, or I've tried it, I can't, can't do it, all these sorts of things. So potency was actually born of being in that environment and realizing that when we're present at work, we are the most potent version of ourselves. And so in the workplace, if we're distracted, we naturally can't be giving 100% to the task that we're in right now. And so when we're present, we're absolutely there. So if you're in conversation with someone, you're completely with them, which means that you're going to get the most out of that conversation. You're going to be in a high state of empathy. There's going to be great collaboration. There's also going to be a lot of just understanding and less reactive state, and the ability to both find an amazing outcome from it. And so we have that on a human level, but also if you're just sitting at your computer and at your task, we all know that if you've got notifications pinging here, there, and everywhere, and you're trying to come up with an idea, or you're trying to work out how the solution to a particular problem, if your mind's in 5 or 6 different places, or back on an old conversation you just had that may have not gone that well, or one that's coming up, or a meeting that's coming up, you're not going to be in your most potent state. So it's an interesting thing that, again, mindfulness practices that can help as doorways into presence, which are often kind of pushed aside from corporate environments. They're actually some of the aspects of a toolkit that can lead us into our most potent, and in business language, productive selves. So that's where the word potency comes from. But it also enables us to then become truly potent in the creation of our life. So when we're present, all the stories and thoughts of our minds start to just still and quiet and dissolve for a while, which means that we're able to actually tap into things like our intuition and start to feel the life that we truly want to create and who we want to be in this life. And so it kind of creates this potency in how we live life, which is also added to with this sense of peace, because when we're present, peace just exists for us as well, because fear is born of the mind. And when the mind is just quelled and thoughts are quelled and the mind is quietened, then again, this state of peace just rises in us and it becomes really potent for us. And then just to cap off in terms of relationship, if we think about it as relationship with those that we love most in life, when you're present with your children or with your partner, your mother, your father, your friends, there's just magic, like in that moment. And you're just truly there looking in each other's eyes and hearing and feeling each other. It's incredible. And then you draw that wider as a circle, and you go from those that you love most to perhaps those that you work with, and you move the conversations beyond the transactional. And you start to get really present with people. And then you start to do it on the streets, and it's amazing, isn't it? When I just had it this morning. I was walking back from my fun morning routine on watching the sunrise and a little meditation here at the rocks at DY. And I had 3 different conversations on the way back with people, short ones, but like really, just big smiles and just present with people. And so that's really where, potency comes from, is it's born of the state of presence for me.
I delivered a mental health in the workplace program recently to 450 business leaders around the country. And one of the men at the end of one of the sessions stood up and he said at the end of the day, Pat, I'm actually going home today to be present to my wife. I never knew until today my wife suffers with anxiety and I wasn't aware. So it was profound. His colleagues gave him a standing ovation. It was just because not only was he in the shift, there was, his sharing of that created a new level of intimacy amongst his peers. And I know when he went home, his wife would be like, what happened? And his people, when he went to work the next day, it'd be the same. That just the whole, seeing with new eyes now. A lens had been removed. And, God, I can feel it even as I think about that. I feel more potent. just in that thoughtscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a beautiful gift, you know, for him to have had that experience, and then for him to then go back as more of himself to his wife and just be there for her.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yes. One of the other areas where you deliver into is supporting people with mental health and positive mental health. There are so many people now living with a level of uncertainty around the COVID phenomena, and experiencing worry, anxiety, some even being brought down heavily around it. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are around practices that we can be. How do we become self-sustaining, and also be, I use the term be a balm, but be a balm and a support for others.
Yeah, it's challenging times, and it's sort of a challenging question, because everyone has their own life stage and situations that they're dealing with. And of course, there's incredible organizations, and it's important to mention these, you know, such as Lifeline, for example, that if people are struggling, you know, they're the people that they should go to, you know, jump online, grab the number, you know, and speak to some professionals that can really help, you know, in some of the cases and the stages from a mental health perspective. If we kind of take the journey a little bit earlier on, and we look at, and this is kind of where I sort of sit and do some work, which is, what can we do every day that helps fill our cup, that helps nurture us, that helps bring back more peace into our lives? And it's drop by drop, you know, it's not this, you don't just swing over from one state to another. It's just it is the journey analogy. But for me, it's a lot of the stuff we already know. And it's about, you know, if we can shape our lives around, you know, what's often termed healthy habits, you know, or practice, I kind of look at them as practices of presence. It can really, really help us, and it helps with kind of reducing a lot of the stress reactions and hormones, and, you know, building up the positive stuff in terms of our chemistry, both emotionally and psychologically, and spiritually as well, if that's your vibe. You know, it's, there's so much stuff that we can do, and we can do it all within a few moments. And if we talk about COVID right now, and that, of course, we're starting to get back into this kind of limbo phase where we had life as it was, then we had shutdown, and now we have sort of fluidity in the work, but definitely where people are commuting less still, the majority of people. I mean, schools have gone back, and Victoria's in its own place right now, and hopefully that, you know, that improves. But generally, people have got a little bit more time in their life. If we just talk to working people in the commute, but everyone can find time in their lives, even pre-COVID. We argue for our own busyness. It's up to us how we structure our day. So if we took 15 minutes out of our day every day, we could have a significant impact on our own mental health. And some of the things that we can do that are so simple. The first one that comes to mind would be to switch off. And we talked about that before. It's like mobile phones or watches or whatever devices they are. They have a great place in our life in terms of the ability for us to connect with friends and family and colleagues and do work in other places and other time zones, all this sort of stuff. But it has a detracting effect from us, because it keeps us in this distracted state. So we really have to be mindful about what our relationship is with technology and how we use it. So if we can just switch off, and for me personally, and there's a bunch of research, but everyone finds their own kind of rhythm with this. For me, it's the start of the day and the end of the day. I know that if I start my day right, then it really helps me in terms of my balance, my clarity, my potency throughout the day. And then if I finish it right as well, it means that I sleep better. And as a result, I kind of wake up better. So the cycle starts to kind of reinforce itself. So by just, for me, it's, I don't put the phone on, you know, for the first hour, or depending on how the day is, maybe the first 2 hours of the day. And I have a whole bunch of other stuff we can talk about in a minute in terms of practices, but just that alone, rather than my alarm going off on my phone and then I'm suddenly drawn into checking emails, or if it's social media or whatever it is, I get to actually kind of ease myself into the day in this relaxed, peaceful, calm state, rather than be jolted into it via technology. So that can really help. And then also when you get home, or if you're working from home, to create this time and this kind of habit for yourself where you switch the phone off. So rather than let work bleed into the evening, and if you've got friends and family or children, we know how much that can detract from relationship, because you're always on the phone and you're never present with your kids or your loved ones. Or even if you're just by yourself, you're constantly kind of taking from your own well by always being on and never giving yourself that time to be present. So our relationship with phones is really important. I'll just touch on a few because I know time is tight. The other one that's super accessible to us all is just getting out into nature. And that can be as simple as going for a couple of minutes. I call them micro moments that I've always taken in the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years when I've been heavy in the work world. I spent a lot of time in the city. I travel international a lot, all that kind of stuff. And so for me, it's like taking 2 or 3 minutes, and I do it 5 or 6 times a day, where I'll just step outside wherever I am. And I will just breathe in, take big breaths, and I'll breathe in the air, which is nature. And I'll either find a park, if that's possible. Beach would be amazing. Or if there's not, just look up at the clouds and the skies, but just and I'm not taking my phone with me at this point. So I just go and I just reconnect in nature. And nature has this amazing effect of just reducing our stress hormones. And if you do it in little drops throughout the day, you'll notice that you become calmer. You notice that you have greater ability to deal with stuff as it comes up. And it just becomes that these little practices help us depressurize. So there's a whole series of them. And I wrote a little book at the beginning of COVID that kind of came to me. And the book itself is an ebook, and it's all the profits go to charity. But it was written with a bunch of these practices, effectively the sort of 13 practices in there that everyone could do within 5 or 10 minutes each day. And all of them help with our mental health, our emotional health, and just help bring a few more drops of peace back into every day in a world that is changing. It is uncertain. When there's change around us, it's very easy for us to get drawn into reacting and trying to create certainty. And really all we can do is firstly just control our own personal internal state.
I've actually purchased, but not as yet read. And that's available on your website, yes?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, we'll give that link at the end of the program. When we were talking previously, we talked a little about ancient wisdom and intuition. So perhaps we can use that as we come towards the closing part of the conversation for, when Clarissa Pinkola Easties wrote a book, Women Who Walk with Wolves. Anyhow, she'd researched a lot before writing the book. She sat with wolves in the wild for 2 years and observed the familial behaviour, and then travelled the world, visiting different countries and exploring all the myths, legends, fairy tales from all of those different cultures. Came back and wrote a very thick book, which demonstrates the similarity between all of the stories that are told anywhere, the folklore, the stories we tell our children when they're young, all have common threads. And one of the things she says in the beginning of the book is we've lost touch with the bare bones of who we really are and our deep instinctual knowing. And I think that kind of leads into what is this ancient wisdom that we could now be tapping into, and how do we get reconnected to our intuitive self?
That's a big question.
Yeah, I know.
It's beautiful, and it's an important one. You know, it's one that I think it's a beautiful one because we can each, in our own way, reflect on and kind of journey into ourselves. And so for ancient wisdom is, for me, I've been lucky enough to live in and therefore be connected to cultures in the Himalayas, across the Himalayas for a couple of years, in the jungles of Central America, and then most recently in this beautiful country with our First Nations people. And there's so many similarities, as you just talked about, that really it comes down to a deep, deep connection with nature and our place as one in nature. And then there's a whole, I mean, it's vast, but it's one of those beautiful things that every piece of wisdom that you kind of unpack is both simple and deeply profound at the same time, because that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is not complex. And it's something that when we hear it, it sort of bypasses our mind and just, you know, a lot of people use the word resonate, you know, it just sits nicely inside us, and it feels like it's a part of us. And so intuition that you mentioned is one of those. And it's a huge part of, and I'm super young, it's important to say this, in my journey with the indigenous cultures here, with the First Nation cultures. But I have a great friend who is super generous with his time in helping just walk with me and share that. And I was just up in country yesterday with him, and we speak most days. But intuition is a major part of their culture, because it's what happens is in their way of looking at things, we have our head and our heart and our gut. And if we put this into a Western context, in our head we have our thoughts. And so our thoughts are always, like, the way I look at it is we have our fixed mind, and our fixed mind only knows what it knows. It only knows what it's experienced at this point in time. And so it will always try and create a reality that is safe and secure and looks like the life that we've led to date, pretty much. And our intuition is this kind of silent guide that helps us kind of find spontaneity and helps us find these things beyond fear. It guides us through fear and into opportunity and into an expansion and into evolution. I've heard it kind of called as intuition is our guide to the evolution of our highest self. And so I often find that I live life, and we live lives in seasons. And so when one season is closing and another one is opening, I know that we have the opportunity to relive that cycle if we want to. And that's where our fixed mind will want us to, you know, because it's comfortable. It knows that it'll hold us in that job for another year, another 3 years, another 5 years, another 10 years. It'll hold us in a relationship that isn't necessarily our truth for another year or 2 years or whatever else it might be. And a lot of it is around security and this kind of control of our life and our environment. But we all know the feeling when that's going on up here, but actually deep down, we understand that that's not our truth. Our time is up with that workplace, or that relationship needs to be closed off, or whatever it might be. A habit that we have in ourselves, even though it's fixed up here, it's not working for us anymore. And so for me, that's what intuition is. It's our guide. And I find that it's most helpful for us in these moments of change. And because it always leads us into a beautiful, fun, often unexpected, you know, extension of our world and our life. And so but in the West, we've sort of been trained to turn the volume down a bit. You know, like we're born with two volume knobs, like the old stereos and stuff. One is fixed mind and one is intuition. And when we're born intuitive. Every child just lives intuitively. They play and they're full of joy and they're present, and everything is done through intuition. And then as we learn, as our cognitive muscle starts to get turned on, so too does the volume of the thought gets turned up. And as that gets turned up, the volume of our intuition gets turned down. So when we're born, our intuition is at 10 and our thoughts are at 0, our fixed mind's at 0, and then they shift over time. And neither are right or wrong. They each have a place in our life and in our world. They're both incredible. And what we've done is like many aspects, we've shifted the balance. And basically our thought for most people is usually up at around 10. And our intuition is at 0, or it's so low that we've either forgotten it or we can hardly hear it. Yeah. And so part of what we need to do, and this is where ancient wisdom comes in, is through things like getting into nature, reconnecting, yarning circles, and all these other practices that are incredible. Meditation, obviously, from Eastern culture as well, from all cultures actually, but we're able to then tap back into the broader aspect of ourself, which includes our intuition, so that when we're in times of uncertainty, we have more to draw on. We don't just have the security hooked, control-based organism of our fixed mind. We have more of ourselves. And so with that, it gives us greater capacity, but it also provides more peace for us to kind of travel through the painful, challenging times of change that we have.
And I think there's that, certainly I've experienced it as I get older, there's a knowing. You just have a knowing. And
knowing.
Yes, you can rely on that. And I think one of the things that I've seen in the last 6 or 8 months or so is people have been in action, been endeavouring to manage current circumstances, but not always seeing like the seeds have been planted, but they're not seeing anything come through yet for what they've been endeavouring to work on, shift, change. And so I think one of the things that I've seen is, and I'm not talking faith with Christianity necessarily, but having faith when you can't see the result yet, I think has a lot to do with the wisdom, and even we don't even have to give it a name. It's like that
trust and faith.
Yes.
It's absolutely. I was having the same conversation yesterday on Country, and faith was the word that was used. It was like the faith that you're just walking the path that intuitively feels right for you. Yes. And then with that, if you can bring in patience, because we're so addicted to, this kind of high speed gratification, and getting things immediately, and goal orientation and getting there as quickly as possible. A lot of that also stops us from enjoying the magic along the way. So when we listen into our intuition, and when we just start to take the small steps following it, if we balance that and we add in patience, what we get to do is we get to experience the smallest drops of magic in every step that we take, because our mind is future orientated. It's always trying to get to the goal, and it makes us blind from seeing everything that's around us, which could be, as if we're talking about parenting, it could be just that like smile or the sparkle in your child's face, or it could be the opposite. It could be something that they really need you to be present for because there's some real sadness and pain that they're going through, but you're going to miss that magic of that moment to be able to there for them. Or it might be out, just taking a walk, and you're too busy trying to either get to the end of the walk or the run to beat your personal time, or because you feel like you've got to get back because you've got to get to your emails, or you've got to get to a dinner or whatever else it might be. And you'll just miss like a myriad of magical moments along the way. And so when we listen into our intuition, and as you said, if we kind of have some trust or faith, again, everyone can pick their own language, that this feels right. You know, you go with that kind of full body feeling that some people talk about, and then let go and just enjoy the journey, you know. And on the journey, what you'll start to see is the stuff that we often miss when we're caught up in distraction and busyness, which is just like, life is challenging, but it's truly magical.
Years ago, I started studying improv acting, and one of the gifts that's been an enduring thing of value to me is it taught me about stepping out in intention, but not in an intention for a thing, just into intention. And I've often, if I've spoken at a conference, I'll have gone during the day in intention to step into an encounter, which is exactly the encounter I want to create, or it will just appear. I spoke to some pediatricians 7 or 8 years ago, and had another session at night at their awards ceremony. And I went out into the street in my lunch break to be able to I wanted to bring back to them a story. Here's what happened when I stepped out in intention, but not to do a certain thing, just in that place. And I stepped into the main street in Wellington, and across the road was a women's lingerie store. And in the left window was a big sign that said, buy the left cup. And in the right window, it said, and get the right one free. So I've got to go into that store. I walk into the store, and there's this gorgeous, buxom woman behind the counter. She puts her fingers in her mouth as I come in the door and gives me a wolf whistle and says, nice tits. Well, she was hilarious. No offense could be taken. And the beauty was, in a few minutes, I learned that she made this beautiful, beautiful lingerie for women with breast cancer. Just extraordinary. And so here's this cheeky interface, that buxom image of that almost grandmother, I guess, roundness and fullness of her feminine self, and her cheekiness, and the huge pattern interrupt. And I went on and had 3 encounters, and I could take them back. And if you don't leave the office, just like you're saying, that can't happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, people say to me all the time, where do you get your stories from? And it's like, well, I step out. Yeah. Thank you so much. One of the things we also mentioned, and let's just go to it before we complete. We were talking before we came on about the COVID phenomena and other things, and deciding whether we'll participate or not, and what we'll participate in or not. And you were talking to me about how a lot of these things can be a mirror. So I wonder, can we go to that before we close?
Yeah, sure. So my experience is that life is constantly holding up mirrors for us. It depends if we see them or not. Yeah. And if we touch on what we talked about in terms of big mirrors, at a sociological level, let's just take the fires, which almost everyone has forgotten. The fires held up a mirror for Australia and beyond, because it's reflective of the whole system from a planetary perspective. But it held up a mirror for us here as to what our relationship with our country, with nature, and with the planet and the environment is. And of course, there was a lot of different responses to that. But these events happen, and it's not just the big events, you know, like they happen on a micro level as well, every day for us. But yeah, the fires were one, and we had the floods, and then we've had COVID, and COVID has been this moment where really, you know, unprecedented in terms of us experiencing it as generations are alive on this planet where all of the systems went on pause, or so many of them, you know, and there was so much uncertainty in life. But in that pause and in that moment, it was like a mirror was held up to us all individually, as well as from a systems perspective. But individually, we could suddenly see what our lifestyle and routines and patterns looked like, because we were no longer commuting. We didn't know if we were going to have work, a lot of people. And we spent more time at home. So we could have a mirror in terms of our relationships, which is, of course, for some people is incredibly challenging, you know. And so these mirrors are around us the whole time, and they've been coming up, I think, at a global level as well as at a personal level in the last 8 or 9 months, through the fires, through the floods that follow, from the environmental mirrors and our kind of connection with planet, and then COVID, which is kind of our life that we choose to live, and our relationship with work and with the people that we love and our families and we live with, and so many other things. And then followed obviously by the Black Lives Matter movement, and our relationship there as to how we feel, you know, as individuals, and what our role is in that. And so life often provides a lot of mirrors. They're big and they're clear right now for us. And then our choice is what we then choose to do as a result of that. So do you choose to see that mirror? Or firstly, do you choose not to see it? You choose to just kind of try and just bury your head and keep busy, or whatever it might be, keep distracted and pretend it doesn't exist as a mirror? Or do you see it, feel something, but then move on again because you're kind of, you know, there's other stuff, you're too busy, and there's other stuff that you value more, basically? Or do you choose to then start to make a change in your life? You know? And that's the role of these mirrors, is to show us the reality of what we're living and what we're experiencing. And when we choose to see them, and then we choose to step into a more loving, compassionate, affluent, connective action, then we get to become a very small part of helping to create a better reality for ourselves right now, for those that we live with, and for future generations, and for people that we'll never meet, you know, on the other side of the planet. And so, yeah, that's really, I'm constantly amazed that, you know, the more your eyes are open, the more you see these mirrors.
Yeah. And
they kind of exist everywhere, because we bring people into our lives that reflect where we're at in some way or other.
Yes.
And that may be, we always like the nice stuff, right? But we also bring people in that really trigger us. But when they trigger us, they're actually, it's that old kind of Buddhist adage that they're our greatest teachers, you know. And these people come in and they'll trigger us because they're showing us an aspect of ourselves that we probably need to do some work on, because we've built this kind of strong fixed identity or egoic structure around that is not the most loving form of ourselves. So yeah, that's, for me, that's what mirrors are. And I think, but as important, or a link to that, is then us being committed and taking responsibility to create the world that we want to live in right now, you know, not leaving it to others to do for us. Absolutely applauding and supporting those that are doing a beautiful job in that, but being active in ourselves. And if you do that step by step, small action by small action every day, that's when a global movement towards a better future starts to happen.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your wisdom and, you know, taking, you know, I think when we allow ourselves time to have these thought spaces and the conversations, we don't know which piece of it's going to open up something for somebody else. Thank you so much. Now, if people would like to find you, access you, have a conversation, what's the best place for them to look you up?
So generally the best place is my website, which is pretty simple. It's my name, which is Alan Riva, ALANRIVA.com. And probably the easiest thing is just to get in touch with me if people want to through there, because I'll get a message straight away and I'll definitely get in touch. Yeah, I love writing, as you know, and so there's, I have a blog, but also there's a bi-weekly email that I kind of send out.
Yes.
That are really, it's called Drops of Goodness.
Yes.
And it's just stuff that certainly has inspired me. And it might be people, it might be organizations, it could be charities, it could be all sorts of things, but it also can be kind of wisdom and knowledge that is just really simple. It's a super quick read, and it goes out Friday lunchtime every other week. So that hopefully everyone can make, 20 minutes for themselves just to, smile really and bring some goodness into their life. So my website is the best thing. I'm not a huge social media user, but I do log on every now and again, and Instagram is probably the best there, which is my handle, or whatever you want to call it, is Alan Riva, one word _ at the end.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, and we'll engage again.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Right,
Take a break.
Thanks for taking a break with Pat Armistead.
Take a break.
Join us next time for more.
Take a break.
And be sure to like, share and subscribe for updates. And don't forget to click the bell for notifications. Bye for now.